joining us for today's SOPAS webinar, How to Finance Your Public Health Degree, featuring Dr. Joseph Korovic, the Director of Admission and Financial Aid at the Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. A few housekeeping items of note. While you are in listen-only mode and your lines have been muted, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation by using the chat or question box. We will address your questions at the end of the presentation. Please be sure to refrain from placing your line on hold during the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available on ASPPH and SOPAS websites. Great. Our speaker today is Dr. Joseph Korovic. He is the Director of Admission and Financial Aid at the Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. He has focused on enrollment management issues and the strategic use of financial aid to make private institutions an affordable option. Prior to joining Columbia, he worked for Fordham University's Graduate School of Education. Dr. Korovic has been in graduate admissions since 1996 and in higher education since 1989. He holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and a PhD in educational administration from Fordham University. Prior to his career in higher education, he worked as a management consultant for a diverse range of clients in the insurance, utility, manufacturing, and food industries. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Korovic.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day, but hopefully this will be rewarding and helpful to you as you are thinking about applying to graduate schools. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what financial aid you can expect at the graduate level, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about how you can look for outside funding sources. I'll give you some tips on how to apply for outside funding sources, and then we're going to actually go through some links so that you can get some ideas of what to look for specifically. So a couple of things before we get started. So first of all, financial aid is like the lottery. You got to be in it to win it. So don't automatically assume that you're not going to be eligible for financial aid. Second of all, I want to give you, from my own personal experience, as they had mentioned, I have a bachelor's degree, 2 master's degrees, and a PhD, and only one of those is from a public institution. The rest are from pricey private institutions. So perhaps around $170,000 or so worth of education, and I only took out $5,000 in loans. And I don't consider myself anyone special, overly smart, whatever. I just was able to do it. So that's why I provide these outside funding instructions so that other folks don't have to carry that heavy burden. So in moving along, okay, I'm having trouble moving my, there we go. Okay, so there's two types of financial aid, or 2 levels of financial aid. So typically if you get accepted at the doctoral level, because it's very competitive, so here at Columbia we have about 400 applications for about 30 spots. If you get accepted at the doctoral level, you're either going to get heavily funded, meaning full tuition, or fully funded plus stipend, which means everything's paid for, okay? But you have to get over so the hardest part with that, with the doctoral level, is that you have to get accepted. At the master's level, regardless of whether you go for an MPH, an MS, an MBA, I don't care. In most cases, institutions will not provide you with 100% financing. So typically, institutions will provide you financing based on 3 factors. Merit, as evidenced by your grade point average and your test scores. Need, as evidenced by your estimated family contribution on the FAFSA. And mission, which is either evidence of or an intention to serving underserved populations in the field, in this particular case, of public health. The more of those things you have, the more likely you are to get something, and the bigger the package. Okay? So typically, in terms of institutional aid, that's aid that the university or institution is going to offer you. Typically, it's scholarships and grants. A lot of cases, those are based on merit. Teaching assistantships, in some cases, the teaching assistantships are reserved for doctoral students, so you have to check with the institution because obviously they want doctoral students to have some practice in teaching, so they give those opportunities to those students first. Here at Columbia, as well as other things, if they have a core, and all schools of public health have core. In some cases, they have second-year students help the first-year students in the core as teaching assistants, and then research assistants. So research assistantship really depends on your research skill set. So when I tell people when they're doing their resumes, they should highlight those skill sets. So when I talk about that, I mean things like, are you familiar with a problem or a population, specific problem or population? Are you familiar with the specific statistical package, the SPS, SAS, something like that? Are you familiar with the specific statistical technique, logistic regression, factor analysis, those types of things? The more of those things you can highlight in your resume, the more likely you are to find research assistantship positions. In some cases, the research assistance positions are not available to people until their second year, because in the first year, you're usually in your core classes. So in some cases, you have to wait till your second year. But always think about that even if you, what we have in a lot of cases, we have students in their first year, they have to pay heavily through loans, and then in their second year, they get all these types of things, the teaching assistantships, the research assistantships, and go relatively free in their second year, okay? So plan things out accordingly as much as possible, and take advantage of those opportunities. So these are the institutional options. Make sure that you meet the deadline dates. What I found when I came to Columbia about 7 years ago is that people would wait until after they got accepted to determine whether they were going to apply for financial aid. And what we found is that they filled out the forms too late, and therefore, even though they were eligible, I had already allocated the funds, and it was too late to get them, get the funds. So it's really important that you meet the deadline dates. These deadline dates are probably more important than application deadline dates. Okay, so if the institution is not going to provide you with 100% financing, what do you need to do? So first of all, you need to search early. So a lot of the deadline dates for applications are not until December or January. So if you wait until then to apply for outside funding sources, in many cases you've missed out on opportunities. So a lot of the deadline dates for outside funding sources are, I would say, September, October, November, or early December. So you need to think of applying for outside funding sources at the same time that you're getting your application materials together. So you need to search early. That's important. You need to search often. I tell people every couple of weeks, really, because I'll give you an example. We had in middle of August a couple of years ago, I got a call from an outside funder, and they wanted a female New York resident who was interested in aging issues. They said, "Do we have anyone?" And I said, "Let me send out an email to our accepted students and see if anyone meets the criteria." We had 4 people that applied, and they had a week to get their application materials in, and they went from getting no funding from us to getting full rides. So that's why it's important that you search on a regular basis, because some of these opportunities come up suddenly or at the last minute, and then what ends up happening is they have a small window of opportunity, and if you miss that window of opportunity, it's too late. Okay. Also, I would recommend that you have a template essay, because in a lot of cases the essays are similar in nature. You might just have to modify it, and have a couple of standby recommenders, so that if you find out that there's a scholarship and the deadline date is this Friday and it's Monday now, you won't miss out on those opportunities, because you could quickly get things together and turn them around. Okay. You need to search for related sources and vary your search terminology. So I always tell people, and I'll go through the examples of this, start with what's obvious and then work to related sources. So if you're interested in something like behavioral sciences, then what you need to do is you need to also look at anthropology, sociology, psychology, things like that, because those are all related areas. So start out with the specific and then move to more related areas, because in a lot of cases there's overlap. Okay. You need to vary your search terminology. So one time I had a person come in, she was from the biostatistics department, and she said, "Dr. Korbeck, I can't find anything under biostatistics." So I went in my search thing, and I couldn't find anything either. So I said, okay, let's think about a different terminology that says about the same thing. So I said, let's change it to statistics. So we changed it to statistics, and we came up with 5 pages of stuff. Now, they don't care whether it's biostatistics or some other type of statistics. Statistics is statistics. It's just a different flavor of the same word. So think about those types of things when you're to vary the search terminology to come up with different things. As you get hits, look at how they describe or the text that's used in that particular outside scholarship, and take those terms that they use to describe it, put those back in as well. That way you maximize the amount of opportunities that you get just based on looking on the terminology they use. You're all a member of organizations, groups, social, religious, fraternal. Check and see if they're offering anything. In many cases, especially in this market, they're not going to advertise things, okay? Because they don't have the money to do that. But the money is sitting there, so it doesn't hurt to ask, okay? The worst they can do is say no. And in some cases, some of our students, what they've actually done is they've convinced their religious organization or social group that, you know, I'm going to go into public health and I'm going to change the world, make a difference in the world. Why don't you support me? You have the Joe Korvick Scholarship Fund, so to speak. So it doesn't hurt to ask. The worst they can do is say no, but if they say yes, it may make a difference for you. And then lastly, expand your network. Don't do this all alone, because as I go through this, you're going to see how daunting the task can be. Expand your network. Tell your friends, family, relatives, enemies that you want to go to a pricey school and you need a little help searching. Okay? I recommend in admissions, in order to get a crowd, what we do is we provide them with food. And in public health, I normally don't recommend pizza, but it does work. Invite people over. Have them each take a look on a different search site, and I'll be giving you the list today. And have them take a look. I tell people, if you find me a $30,000 scholarship, I'll take you out to a nice meal, for a nice meal. So have other people help. They're more than willing to help you, and it just makes it a little less overwhelming, let's just say. Now, I'll give you an example. My niece wanted to go to medical school. So she told her friends, family, relatives about that, and about a month later, she asked her parents about it, and her parents said, you're an adult now, figure it out yourself. So she told her friends, family, and relatives about it. About a month later, one of her friends told her about a Kiwanis Club scholarship. She was one of 3 people that applied, and for those folks who know statistics, those are darn good odds when it comes to scholarships, and she just finished up Tulane Medical School on a Kiwanis Club scholarship that one of her friends told her about. So it's really important that you let other folks know, because they may hear something a week, 2 weeks, a month later, and they say, oh, I remember Joe was asking if anybody knew about any outside funding sources. I just heard about something. Let me send this off to him so that he can see if this is a viable opportunity for him. So these are the generic search strategies that you want to apply. Okay, so now I'm going to take you into some specific sites, and I'm also going to highlight the process in terms of how you should proceed in what level. So before you start any outside funding opportunity search, what you should do is you should create what I call an identity inventory. So you belong to certain groups, okay? And all those groups are potential search options for you, or search strategies that you can use. So you belong to a certain race, ethnicity, certain religion, you hold certain languages, you have certain gender identification, you have certain sexual orientation identification, you have certain things in terms of where you were born, what part of the country you were born, where you are in the family structure. Are you oldest? Are you youngest? Are you first in your family to go to college? What kind of socioeconomic background do you come from? All of those things are potential search terms or search strategies. So think of those things first. Get those things down on paper. It'll make your search a lot easier and probably more profitable. So each one of you is going to has a certain number of graduate school choices. The best thing to do is go to their site first. Go to the institution's site first and check for their outside funding sources. So I'm going to go to ours, and on ours we have various funding sources. So this is something that we've compiled, and in a lot of cases you either meet the criteria or you don't, okay? And there's a whole list And once again, as you can see, some of these things pertain to that identity inventory that I told you about. So here's Canadian Federation of University Women. So you have to identify yourself as a Canadian citizen and as a female. Okay? Association of American Indian Affairs. So if you're an American Indian or Native American, those are things that you will apply to you. So all those types of things, go to there first. That's the easiest and most logical. Okay? Then what I'm doing is, so that's the one way to identify yourself by your identity. Then all of you, if you're going into, especially coming to a place like Columbia, if you're going into a specific type of research or have a passion for a specific type of research, you can also get funding to help fund your research. A lot of cases, these are going to be for your second year, but what I'm doing is I'm going to go to here to other government funding. Okay, so you see here under other government funding, look at all these organizations that provide you with funding sources. Okay, so these are all potential funding sources, and then below here, here's a whole bunch of different conditions or areas that if you're doing research in that particular area, you can get funding for it. So this is another way to look for outside funding sources based solely on your research interests. So personal identity, second one is research interests. Okay? Then we have, this goes back to your identity inventory. So let's just click on student type. So, okay, so here at student type, if you look on the left-hand side there, you can do it for adult learners, age specific. If you were a former Boy or Girl Scout, you can get scholarships, okay? If you're disabled, if you're first generation, so these are some of the things I talk about. One person came into my office and he was looking for outside funding sources, and I asked him if he was in a fraternity when he was an undergraduate. He said yes. I said, well, let's take a look at your fraternity site and see if there's any scholarships there. And sure enough, they offer scholarships for people who were fraternity members. If you're left-handed, if you're married, if you're any former beauty pageant winners, if you're tall, if you're a vegan. And in my particular case, one time I was looking for outside funding sources, and hopefully there's folks here who fit this criteria. I typed in scholarships for twins because I'm an identical twin. 5 pages of scholarships for twins. You don't have to do anything special for it. It's just who you are. And there's scholarships for twins. So people think that there's, they think if I'm not a 4.0 student or a member of a certain group, there's no way I'm going to get scholarships. But you'd be surprised at the types of scholarships that you can get. So this is another area of scholarships based on type or organizations that you might have belonged to. Okay? Now, remember I had told you guys that think outside the box. So I always tell people, go to related sites. So we have a School of International and Political Affairs. Okay, it's called our SEPA site. And let me try pulling this one up. Okay, so here's our School of International and Public Affairs. They have a database of external scholarships and stuff. So I'm going to click on Advanced Search. Okay, so you see all these different categories. So one time I just clicked on women and apply, and here you go. Here's a whole bunch of sites. Here's a whole bunch of things for women. And, once again, this is on the SEPA site. So they don't care whether you're going for public health or policy, whatever. In a lot of cases, if you're interested in policy type things, there's an overlap. Okay? Then if you look, remember I told you to take a look at broad categories. So one time I was helping someone search for sources on this site, and I said, I'm assuming you're interested in human rights, right? So we clicked on human rights. Let's take off women. Okay, so human rights, and go. Okay, we're waiting. Okay, here you go. Here's human rights scholarships. Okay, and pretty much everybody in public health is either interested in human rights or social justice, it's a different perspective. So you might be from an epidemiological perspective or other perspectives. As you can see here, look at Japanese Americans. So once again, your identification with ethnicity, Jewish community centers. So if your religious affiliations. So all of these things apply. And like I said, be as creative as you can. Be as creative as you can. You can come up with all sorts of things. So this is a SEPA site. I also mentioned going to the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. So if you're interested in behavioral aspects of public health, then look for the psychology, look for the anthropology, sociology, political science, ethics, or history. All those things, they don't care whether you're strict, hardcore psychology or whether you're interested in the psychology of public health or the psychology of changing health-related behaviors. So think as much cross-reference as you possibly can. So here's another area. Okay. Okay. Then we have here. This is the top. This is through our professional organization, our financial aid professional organization. This is the top 99 Twitter sites. Okay. And these are the sites that students say are they've been successful at finding outside funding sources. So as you can see, there's 3. You keep going, it goes on and on. And this is kind of where you're going to need your friends, family, and relatives to help you out because there's a lot of stuff to check out here. Okay, so spend the time on that. But you know, there's a lot of opportunities on the Twitter site as well. Okay, so close that out. Okay, then what we've done through the help of ASPPH is we have created a one-stop shop for outside funding sources. So I would almost recommend that this is the place you go. And this is kind of why we're doing this webinar today. On the SOFAS site where you go to apply, we've also asked each one of the schools of public health to provide us with their outside funding sources. And we had a grad assistant this summer combine those into one comprehensive list. So it's actually, I think there's over 150 different outside funding sources on this. So this is a good place to start. And go, it comes up. I don't know. Nope. I think we've, okay, hold on, let me go back. There we go. Okay, here we go. So here's the different tips and tricks, some of the things I've been talking about, but if you go down to the bottom, so you got a citizenship requirement, so here you go. These includes scholarship opportunities for international students, so you see a whole bunch of them there. Okay, that's quite comprehensive, based on minority and underserved populations, so general, women, African American, American Indian, Hispanic, Latino, LGBTQ, applicant-specific criteria, medical history, volunteer activity. I know there's a number of scholarships for people who've done community service work, family status, military status, individual characteristics, and the list goes on and on and on. Area of study, that's another area to go through. So health disparities, science, technology, mathematics, lot of opportunities, but like I said, this is a very, very comprehensive list. I think it's going to make your life much easier when it comes to looking for outside funding sources. This is a good one-stop shop for outside funding sources, so definitely take advantage of it because it provides you with a lot of information. Then there's also state sites. So you can go to the state sites. Now, in some cases, the state sites apply only to people who are residents of the state and actually applying to schools in the state, but in some cases they don't. So in my particular case, I live in New York. Okay, now it's telling me that's not available. Anyways, let's try Wisconsin. Okay, so here's the Wisconsin site where I went to undergraduate, and here's a whole bunch of different funding sources. So in some cases, they would apply only to those folks who are going to go to school in Wisconsin, but in other cases, they don't care if you take it outside the state. So check those state funding sources out as well. So Once again, based on your residency, your state of residence, you can be eligible for some funding sources. On our particular site, and I'll take you here only because most institutions will have something like this, this is what we call our experts guide. So on the experts guide, basically you can match up with professors with similar research interests. So this is your opportunity to make a connection with professors in order to try to get on funding for as a research assistant. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, that's going to be critical that you highlight those skill sets in your resume so that you can that'll help identify you as a person who has the skill sets necessary to be connected with a professor. So you can make connections with professors. One word of caution is if you're making connections with professors, make sure you've read some of their work before you reach out to them. It just is much more meaningful if you come from a point of an informed point rather than, oh, I'm interested in doing research with you. Can you tell me a little bit about the opportunity? So make sure you're prepared for those types of things. Okay. Then here are also outside funding search engines. These are more generic. These are also included in the SOFA site, but they're pretty much generic. So I would start with the top things first, and then work your way down to outside funding sources. In these search engines, remember your identity inventory, and you can type in different things. So race, ethnicity, gender, those types of things, and it'll you'll be able to see what's available for students. Okay. And there's my contact information. So I think we're pretty much done with my side of it. So if there are any questions, please let me know.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Korovic. We will now take this time to address your questions. Feel free to type your questions in the chat box. Okay, there are a few that are coming through. I've had a couple of requests for the PowerPoint after. Is that okay, Dr. Korovic?
It's for the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, that's fine. Yes, this is not proprietary information. I want you all to go through college as debt-free as possible because I don't want to pay off your student loans for you.
Great. So we will send the PowerPoint along afterwards.
Absolutely.
So the first question that came through is, what sort of financial aid is available for international students? How are financial aid opportunities different from native students?
Yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, I wish I could do more for international students, but in a lot of cases, because the funds are tied to grants, in a lot of cases you have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. So what ends up happening is there are some international sources on the SOFA site, and what we've done here at Columbia is we poll our incoming international students from all the graduate schools and ask them what type of funding they had that they received, and they then provide us with, we create a comprehensive list of where our current students have gotten international funding. We do a generic, and then we also do it by country. It's not 100% comprehensive, and by all means I can send that to folks too if they want that. But that, I apologize, with international it's very, very difficult because there's limited opportunities.
Thank you. Second question, how many hours a week do you recommend researching or applying to applications from September to January?
That's a good question. I recommend 2 hours every 2 weeks. Okay, I think that provides you with enough time. Now, some people say I don't have a 2 hour block of time in my life, and I realize that life is busy. We don't have 2 hours. So what I tell people is what my doctoral professor once told me when I was writing my dissertation. He said, spend 10 minutes a day on it and you'll get it done. And I remember telling him, I said, if I only spend 10 minutes a day on my dissertation, I'll probably be dead before it's done. But he said, try it anyways, and I did, and I actually, within a year, I had my dissertation done, because what you find is 10 minutes goes into an hour pretty quick. So I know when you're searching on these things, if you start getting some hits or some potential hits, you're going to spend more than 10 minutes on it. So whatever works for you. If you have the 2 hour time block, then 2 hours every 2 weeks. if not 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes every other day, and you'd be surprised at how quickly you can do it. My staff also tells me that I'm overly optimistic about these types of things, so let me put it in perspective. So I told you about my personal situation, so that's part of the reason why I do this, because it's like if I can do it, and like I said, I don't feel like I'm the smartest person in the world or belong to special groups or whatever. I'm just an average, ordinary person, and yet I was able to do it. But there is a high school in the middle of the Midwest. It's not a Bronx Science or a Stuyvesant. Not everyone knows what that is, but that's basically some of the top schools here in New York City. And they bring in more funding for their seniors to go to college than any other school in the country. And it's primarily because their administrators and their faculty members encourage each one of those seniors to apply for outside funding sources. There's probably 250 or 300 in their graduating class, and each one of those students applies to no less than 40 different outside scholarships, but they bring in millions. So I guess what I'm saying is looking for outside funding is a full-time job. It really is. But you will find that the difference between your top choice school and your second choice school will come down to between $10,000 and maybe $20,000. And by doing the research up front and getting those applications out, you'll then have the option of going to your first choice school instead of your second choice school. But you're going to have to work at it. That's why I say bring in your friends, family, relatives, enemies. Let everybody know that you're interested in this. Have them help you out and see what happens.
Great, thank you. The third question is it also possible to find funding sources that can help you repay your student loans accrued?
There is one, and if I can go back on my slides, so this loan repayment thing on the bottom here, I'm not sure this is active anymore, but there is some sort of, okay, basically, I forget what the technical name of it is, but it's basically people who are rich contribute to various organizations. So they have websites where you can go to and put your characteristics in there, and people who want to sponsor you or support you will help pay back your loans, okay? Now, I do not necessarily endorse or recommend any of that because I always am a little skeptical about it, but there are sites out there that can provide you with help in paying off your loans. But be careful is all I can tell you. Be careful and don't put any money out in the front end of it, because if you have to do that, also when you're looking for outside funding sources, do not pay money for someone to help you with it. That's probably a scam. You can do this stuff on your own.
Great, thank you.
I think they're called loan funders, I think.
Great. The next question is, what percentage of first-year students receive aid?
It really varies based on school. So some schools have a lot more money than others. Here at Columbia, I would say, okay, so it depends on how you define aid. If you're defining aid including the federal funding, which is typically the Stafford loans, the unsubsidized Stafford loans, there's no more subsidized loans at the graduate level. It's only unsubsidized. Then we're up to about 60-some% of our students are on some sort of financial aid. In terms of free money, I would say probably about 40% of the students are on some sort of free money. But once again, it really varies based on the institution. In a lot of cases, you can get this information from the financial aid offices of the places that you plan on going to. They'll be able to tell you what percentage of funding is available. Our funding ranges anywhere from maybe $10,000 to a full ride, full tuition. In some cases, for doctoral students, like I said, we provide full tuition plus stipend.
Great. The next question is, can you apply to unlimited amounts of scholarships, or do some have limits?
You can apply to as many scholarship opportunities as you want. So yeah, that doesn't that shouldn't matter. I don't think they, because remember, these are outside funding sources, so in most cases they don't care where you're taking it to. What will happen is you can't, from a purely financial aid standpoint, you can't have more money than what the cost of attendance is. So you can't, I call it, you can't make money on the deal, but you can get fully funded, which would mean tuition, fees, room, board, living expenses, the whole 9 yards. So yeah, some students could go all the way, and our cost of attendance, I think, is $60,000, $70,000 a year. That includes tuition, living expenses, the whole 9 yards.
Great. What aid is available for those who have served with AmeriCorps? And I also am going to include Peace Corps and other organizations, volunteer organizations.
You'll find that some of the schools of public health actually have, they'll match what you're going to get from those organizations. And in some cases, they even have, they'll pay more than that. So what I would do is I would check with the individual institution. I know here at Columbia, we're working on an agreement with folks, but we don't have that yet. With AmeriCorps, I think we match. Peace Corps, we haven't done anything specific, although we tend to be a little bit more sympathetic with folks that have been in the Peace Corps. But definitely, yes, those are both areas that if you work in those particular areas, you can get matching funds.
Perfect. The next question is, how are the financial aid packages for graduate school with a GA, TA, or RA different from those in undergraduate school?
Well, that's a good question, but I'm not sure it varies too much. I mean, it really depends. It might be a different amount, but basically the idea is the same. So a teaching assistantship means you're going to be in a class either proctoring tests, in front lecturing, or helping a professor do like discussion sections. Research assistants are primarily, they're going to be high levels of research, and in many cases it's tied to professors' grants. So it could be collection of data, so you could be out in the field collecting data. You could be taking the data and entering it into a statistical package like SAS or SPSS and running the numbers for the professors. It could be helping writing up the results, and actually in some cases, especially at the doctoral level, co-authoring into things like that. And then RA-ships, what I tell people is if you were an RA on the undergraduate level, a lot of graduate folks, at least here in public health, we have a number of our graduate students who are RAing in the dorms, so it could be at the graduate level dorms or it could be at the undergraduate level dorms. And if you have experience like that, it's free room and board. So that's a pretty sweet deal. It takes a big chunk out of your expenses. But in a lot of cases, it's going to be similar in terms of responsibilities that you might have had on the undergraduate level in those capacities, but it may be a larger amount in terms of dollar amount.
Perfect. The next question is, I'm already in a master's program and missed the opportunity to apply, and I'm now paying out of pocket. What can I do now to find resources for the rest of the year and next year, or is it too late?
It's not too late. In fact, I had this same presentation to our incoming class about a week ago, and I told them they need to start looking now. So the things that I'm telling you about now, September, October, November, now is the time to look so that you can set the groundwork for the second year. So definitely look for outside funding sources. In some cases, some of the sources actually want you to be in the program before they'll give you the money. In other cases, things like research assistantship and teaching positions, in some cases, the institution doesn't want you to take advantage of those things until your second year because they want you to focus on your core classes. So by all means, start now. You have plenty of opportunities. Get to work on it. My guess is if you're in your first year of studies, your hands are full anyways, so try to get your friends to do it to help you as well. Get a group of people that are in your class, because in some cases, that's fine. 2 or 3, you can apply for the same scholarship. And if they offer more than one, then you all get it, and you all help each other in order to work on trying to get those types of things. So yes, do it now but start now. Don't wait too much longer.
The next question is it advantageous to inform the schools of one's need for financial aid when applying? Let's say if attending the school depends on it, and if yes, how would you suggest to do this?
Okay, so typically what we ask on our application is if a person is interested in financial aid or not, because we have some students that are not. They're either going to bring in funding or they have the resources that they don't need the funding. So yes, you should indicate that you're doing it. And then what happens is this, is make sure you get all your materials in, FAFSA and whatever, any additional materials that they need in advance. Typically what's going to happen is you're going to get a financial aid package, okay? And so soon after you get accepted, you're going to get a financial aid package. Go over the financial aid package, and if there's still an issue, then what we do is we have what we call reconsiderations. Have a conversation with the financial aid folks in that school. The more you get your name out front, the more then if things become available, the more likely you are to get something or they remember you. So I always tell students, I said, you know, come on, if you really want to come to Columbia, let's try to make it work for you. So come into my office, I'll tell you what's available. I provided you with outside funding sources, and typically the ones who are the most successful are the ones that meet me halfway. So for instance, if you're telling me you want 100% full ride, I go, well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that for you. But if you say, I can bring $25,000 to the table from an outside funding source that I applied for, and you give me some more money, we can make it work. So try to meet people halfway. Keep in contact with them on a regular basis. You know, be polite, don't be annoying, and just, you know, keep your face out there. Let them know that if something does become available, could they let you know about it? And ask for it doesn't hurt to ask for reconsideration. The worst they can do is say no. Okay, and in some cases they're not going to be able to do anything like that until. In some cases, you might have to wait. So I always tell people, so there's a lot of play between the time people are getting accepted. So we have usually February and March is when we accept people. People have to pay their deposit by April 15th. So in some cases, we tell people, okay, as we get close to April 15th, the people tell us that they're not coming. That frees up money that then I can allocate to other folks. In some cases, it's even after April 15th. So between April 15th and May 1st. So sometimes you just have to be patient. And things might become available.
The next question is, I'm planning on applying for a master's degree in Europe. Do you have any particular suggestions for websites for financing graduate studies abroad?
Abroad. There are some, if you go to some of these search engines, there are a few things on scholarships for international students abroad. There's one on, let me just see here. There's one on this Twitter site here. Let me just go to that. It's for international students, but it's also for study abroad. Okay, here it is. Okay, so, okay, and it's one of the first ones here. Not that one. New scholarships. Try the new scholarships, number 11. That has scholarships for international students as well as scholarships for people who are U.S. citizens who want to study abroad. So that's a good site to go to.
The next question is, I'm currently working full-time but will be leaving this job for graduate school. Can I get a reconsideration of my financial situation from the school or FAFSA since I won't be drawing an income?
Yes, you can. You can ask for that. Unfortunately, the way the FAFSA works is it's based on your last year's income. So in some cases, that might limit the amount of funding that you get in your first year, but you can apply for your second year and potentially get something then if you don't get something in your first year. Have a conversation with your financial aid office and let them know. Now, of course, I have people that make, that are making, $200,000 before they come here, and then I say to myself, well, I'm not sure there's any need-based aid there because I'm assuming you haven't spent all that money, that you've saved up a little bit of it for college or for graduate school, once again, be reasonable with the financial aid folks. Be honest, be reasonable. They will try to help you out. But expect that you might have to do a little bit of compromising. And once again, even if you don't get into your first year, don't be afraid to ask for it in your second year. Don't assume that if you didn't get it in your first year, you won't get it in your second year. And this is a particular case where definitely if you didn't get it in your first year, if you're going down to zero income, you're going to be able to get it in your second year. So keep trying.
I think that this will be our last question.
Okay.
I've heard of pay-as-you-go graduate school programs in which you work for a program while you study. Do these programs exist for public health?
I can't say for sure. I've heard of those programs. We do not have one of those programs here at Columbia. The best thing we have is a level billing plan or monthly payment plan. But I'm sure there are some schools that have that, but you'd have to check with the individual institution.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to our speaker, Dr. Korovic, for an insightful presentation. Our next SOFAS webinar will be on tips and tricks of the SOFAS application titled How to Apply Through SOFAS. It will be on September 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern, and the registration link is coming through your chat box now. Thank you again, Dr. Korovic.
Thank you.